And we would be responding to calls, and I would hear the officer over the radio while we were responding to box alarms, them saying, slow your response, it's just food on the stove. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take that phrase to help firefighters pay more attention to the food that's on their stove that I believe that's ultimately killing us.
Well, Jonathan, man, I'm excited to have you on the show. Welcome to the 2448. Today, we're going to talk about it's a nonprofit called Food on the Stove, right?
Correct.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So kick us off. The 2448 is a show. We talk to first responders primarily about the businesses that they run. And most of our audience has been, or our guests have been for-profit, small businesses that are run by firemen or that support the public safety industry. But your business is unique. You guys are a food-oriented, not-for-profit. Share with me a little about what you guys do.
Okay. So a little bit about my background. I'm a DC firefighter. EMT. I founded Food on the Stove 6 years ago, almost 7 years ago. And what we do is we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that provides tools and resources to help firefighters live a healthier lifestyle through enhanced nutrition and exercise.
Dang, you got that down to an elevator pitch. That's great.
Yeah. So the reason that's so important is 44% of all firefighters who die in the line of duties die from a heart attack.
Yeah.
And the life expectancy, some studies show 10 to 15 years less than every other employee in America. Not only that, we're the only occupation that cooks all 3 meals at work. So while there's a lot of good meals made in the firehouse, the meals aren't necessarily good for us. So what we're seeking to do is help firefighters be more proactive about their health by educating them and putting healthier meals on their table.
Interesting. So is there a correlation, or do you see so firefighters dying of heart attacks, you would think maybe the general public, it's the pagers scare them up because the station's alerting, whatever, or so much stress around the job. Do you think that there's a lot more that has to do with the lifestyle of the stuff we consume versus just the stressors of the job?
I do. I think that's one of the things we can control. I always tell firefighters, control the controllable. You can't control sleep deprivation, hazardous environments, or stress of the job. But the best way to combat heart disease and other ailments are through diet and exercise. And as I mentioned, we're the only occupation that cooks all 3 meals at work. So those meals, you really can't really, you're trying to feed 15 people, 10 people on a budget. One of the biggest misconceptions too is that our meals are funded by tax dollars. But in all actuality, we chip in every day and we buy our own food. And that oftentimes leads us to buying the cheapest thing possible to make it affordable for everybody to eat.
That's actually a really good point. So what's your background? You're a fireman in DC. Have you always been in DC, or you always been a fireman, or kind of how'd that start?
No. So I'm a second generation firefighter. I've been a firefighter for 11 years. My father worked for DC Fire and EMS for 32 years, retired at the rank of deputy fire chief. Unfortunately, he passed away 9 years after he retired.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
So when I became a firefighter 11 years ago and I saw how they were eating in the firehouse, I figured that probably had something to do with my father's ailment. So I wanted to do something to change that. So I started Food on the Stove. So it's really it's a passion project. It's a project to help firefighters live healthier so that they may not have to go through the same things I went through when I lost my dad.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Was he around to see you start the business?
No. So I was 15 years old when my father passed away.
Oh,
so he was long gone by the time I became a firefighter. I didn't become a firefighter until I was 30 years old.
Oh, wow. What was it that where did you get the itch, or what made you make that call? Because I feel at 30, you probably already had 1 or 2 other jobs. What was it that kind of drove that?
I'm not sure. I think, if I'm honest, I had always grown up around it, but I never really thought about being a firefighter. But lack of opportunity, to be honest with you. There wasn't a lot of options where I felt like I can provide for my family in Washington, D.C. I didn't have a college degree at the time. And I kind of reverted back to how did my dad provide for his family? And it was through the fire service. So I decided that, this is something I want to do. I had grown up around it. I had seen it. I saw what it was able to do for my family. And I decided to kind of leap out there. It took me 5 years to actually get hired.
Oh, really?
I applied. It took a long time. DC is is a department that a lot of people want to work for. So yeah.
That's cool. Tell me a little bit about your, when you were a kid thinking about the fire service. I'm so curious, you would have had a view of your dad and of the public safety industry. And then when you get into it, how does that view match, or is it totally different now that your boots are actually in it?
It's totally different, right? So, but I'm able to now see why my dad did a lot of the things that he did in the house that he picked up from the fire service. The fire service is probably one of the most unique jobs where, you know, you're not sitting at a desk. And a lot of times you can be, if you're an officer, you're responsible for others. But sometimes, like if you're riding an ambulance, you're responsible for yourself. So you have to kind of grow up really fast, and you're responsible not just for yourselves, but people are trusting you into their homes and things of that nature. So
Yeah.
the correlation I didn't necessarily make when I was a kid. My father was a chief, so I saw more from him being
Oh,
in
yeah.
charge. When people came to our house, they still referred to him as a chief. And the times were totally different then.
Yeah.
Now I've realized that Sunday cleanup or Saturday cleanup in my house and doing certain chores really stem from the fire service. The meals that we ate sometimes at home was stemming from the fire service, things he had picked up in the fire service.
That's so
So
funny.
I was able to kind of make that connection to it was a big part of who he was and how he was able to develop over the
Yeah.
years.
So tell me a little bit about how that kind of interest in the fire service that became a career transpired into this health-minded food thing. I mean, are you like a gym rat? You love going, you know, what, like where does this all line up?
So as I mentioned, I'm a second generation firefighter. Dad worked for DC for 32 years, died 9 years after he retired. So I walked into the firehouse kind of health conscious because my brother was very health conscious, and that's kind of where I picked it up from. He had lost
Yeah.
over 200 pounds
Oh, wow.
just eating correctly, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm really this mission or ministry that I'm in is really an extension of what God was already doing in his life. So I was already kind of health conscious, but I walked into the fire service and then I saw how they were eating. I was like, for our jobs to depend so much on our heart operating properly, this probably isn't the best way to eat.
Yeah.
So I would ride on the side of truck 6 and I would respond. My dad and I were assigned to the same company out of the academy. He was
No
assigned to
way.
truck 6. I was
That's
assigned to
cool.
truck 6. And we would be responding to calls and I would hear the officer over the radio while we were responding to box alarms, them saying, slow your response, it's just food on the stove. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take that phrase to help firefighters pay more attention to the food that's on their stove that I believe that's ultimately killing us.
That's
So
so
the
cool.
name is derived from a double entendre. It's the number one way to structure fires start due to food being left on the stove unattended.
Yeah.
So that phrase resonates with firefighters. So I started it, like I said, as a passion project. I oftentimes say that food on the stove was started by a 15-year-old boy that missed his father. I didn't realize how much I missed my dad until I became a firefighter at 30 years old. I had a
Yeah.
hard time at the academy one day. I was struggling, I think, with a quiz or a test. And that was the first day I went home. I actually cried and I was like, I miss my father.
Dang.
So I started this with 5 meals, and now we're at over 60,000 meals for the fire service.
No
We've been
way.
sponsored by Giant, United Healthcare, Verizon, Host Hotels, and Amazon. So Amazon recently paid for the development of an app that we created. If you've ever heard of Blue Apron or
Oh,
HelloFresh,
yeah, absolutely.
we started one called Farm to Firehouse. And for every $10 we raise, it goes to the protein, produce, and packaging. This is our a platform or something that we created to put healthier meals on firehouse tables.
That's awesome. I want to know a little about I think that's really cool. And where I want to get in this story is I want to understand how that business case worked, but I also want to understand like, how did you take your, like, what was this journey like? You know, like you had this idea. I assume you were already a fireman at the time that you started the nonprofit and began kicking this off. What were the early days like? What was the first action you took? Or what was the first like, all right, I'm going to teach these guys how to be healthy? Do you have to bang on the station captain's door and say, hey, can we have a chat? Or like, what's the first move you take?
So it was just a step of faith. It was really, I had this vision. I wanted to do something. So no, in the fire service, like I said, the misconception is that we pay for the government pays for our food. But since we're paying for our own food, I don't really have to ask anybody we're bringing in food every day.
Yeah.
Right. So what I decided to do, I went to the farmer's market. I bought 6 grass-fed steaks, 6 stalks of broccolini, 6 sweet potatoes. And I took it to a firehouse in Northeast DC, not too far from where I grew up from.
So not your crew, you started with someone else's crew.
Yeah, I started with someone else's crew. And the reason I did that is because I asked my wife at the time, I said, do you mind if I take my overtime money and feed firefighters. At the time, that's what I could afford. That was a firehouse of 6 people. My firehouse had like 13 people. So I'm using my own money at this time. So I said, let me start small. And I took it to a firehouse, actually the first firehouse that I ever visited when I was growing up.
Oh, interesting.
And not too far from my neighborhood. So I took it to them. And the funny thing is, they didn't know if I was trying to help them or poison them. They were like,
no
you
way.
got a sign here.
What the hell are you
like,
doing?
What are you bringing food here for? And my response was, I want you all to eat healthier. But nobody's turning down free food, especially when it's steak in the firehouse.
Yeah, exactly. So what did you do? Like, were you given a lesson or given a talk while you were doing it, or like what was it like?
So the first day, that's what the goal was, but the nutritionist that day canceled on me. The camera person, we had this whole thing planned out where the chef was going to cook the food, the cameraman was going to shoot what we were doing. So
you were going to film a whole thing,
and everybody canceled. So all I had was the groceries. So I still took the groceries. I said, look, it didn't go as planned. So we'll try it another time. So I dropped the food off. Of course, they cooked it and they ate it. Then I tried it again at my firehouse. I was able to work a little bit more overtime, had some more money, took it to my firehouse, brought a chef in, we filmed it, and they really enjoyed it. And at that moment, what happened was that those guys in my firehouse wanted to donate to Food on the Stove. At the time, we weren't really set up for donations or anything. So awesome. I wasn't doing it to receive donations.
Yeah.
I just really wanted to get this idea that I had in my mind out.
Yeah.
And they end up donating me some money. So I said, you know what? Instead of just giving me the money, how about you choose the next firehouse that we go to? And it just can't be on your shift or in your battalion. So what it ended up doing was creating a culture of giving.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, because it's not like, hey, give my buddies.
For that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they weren't going to just keep it to the firehouse next door to them or right up the street for them.
Yeah.
It was you paying it forward to somebody you don't often work with.
Yeah.
So they sent it across the river to Southeast, and we were able to feed them. And then Southeast, we were able to say this meal was provided to you by Engine 11, Truck 6. And then Engine 15, Squad 3 sent it somewhere else. And then we just kind of created that culture of giving around the fire service where we would bring the chef in and we would teach a class called How to Read a Food Label.
That's so interesting. So break that down. I'm so curious what that actually, I'm picturing this as like, all right, well, we're going to go cook dinner. And I've been in a million firehouse dinners where you just shoot the breeze and you cook dinner and it's like, how much barbecue sauce can you stuff on it? But it sounds like this is a little more structured, a little more intentional. How did you come up with what you were going to do in that? Like, I'm going to teach this class. Obviously you got to plan that, put that together.
Yeah. So, I'm going to tell you in the beginning, it wasn't a lot of planning that went to it. It was just a heart to serve, right? Like we just wanted to serve those. Our mantra is that we serve those who serve us. So we wanted to serve. So we went in there. My goal was I like to go out to eat. I wanted to bring a restaurant experience into the firehouse. I think food is a great unifier. I think it's something that brings people closer together.
Yeah.
And I believe that firefighters and EMS personnel deserve the best of everything. So I really wanted to bring the best quality food. This was our opportunity to serve them. So we came in, we bought the chef, we washed the dishes. It was their opportunity to just sit and kick their feet up. But in doing so, it's my personal belief that people are more willing to listen to you when they know you actually care.
Yeah.
And so the caring part was us serving them. The listening part was them hearing what I had to say in terms of health and wellness and listening to my story and how it impacted me.
Yeah.
Because one thing we know that firefighters care about is one, their community, but even more so than that is their family.
Yeah.
Right. So being able to tell the story about how it affected my father's health affected us and him passing away affected us. I oftentimes say that or tell them that had my father known how it would have affected his family, he would have invested just as much in his health as he did in his 457 plan or his compensation plan, because he would have known in order to maximize your retirement, you have to be alive.
You gotta be around for it. Yeah. What's your ask of the guys? Like when you call a fire station or gals, but firefighters, when you call up a station and say, hey, we want to come put this program on for you. Is it like, hey, I want you guys to give me your ear for an hour. I'm going to give you guys a presentation on health, but I'm going to feed you really well in the process? Or like, what do you actually say? What's the pitch to the agency?
No, it's let me serve you. Give me an opportunity to serve. Just like you serving the public, let me serve you, right? And we're going to have a conversation. This isn't me talking to you or talking at you. This is us having a conversation, me sharing my story with you. We share about the late Lieutenant Kevin McCrae. We did a documentary on heart disease in the fire service that focused on him and the incident that happened to him some years back, several years ago. And we just have a conversation about it. We answer questions that they may have. We ask them, how can we better serve you? What do they, because health and wellness looks different for everybody. It's not a one size fits all. So I don't go into the firehouses saying, hey, I know it all. This is what you should do. Take my regimen.
Yeah.
I'm just offering you some more insight into potentially how it can affect not just you, but your community, your family, those who you work with. So we want you to pay more attention to your health. The same way you serve the public and you take care of them, take care of yourself the same way.
Were there any like any funny stories from the early days when you're like banging on doors trying to get the thing? Where like I'm sure probably guys are like, the hell you want to come talk to me for, man? Like, I don't know about this.
In the beginning, I would talk to anybody that was willing to listen. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna start this nonprofit called Food on the Stove. And they were like, oh yeah, it's cool. You know, that sounds like a cool idea. And when I first walked into the first firehouse, I think people were still a little bit skeptical. But now 60,000 meals later, they're like, oh, this must be the real thing.
Real.
Every Thanksgiving, we do a turkey drive. We just recently did, instead of turkey, we did brisket to every firehouse in DC.
Dang.
So last year we did turkeys to every firehouse in DC, Prince George's County, Arlington, Alexandria, and Howard County. So that was 100 turkeys that we delivered on Thanksgiving Day to firehouses. This year we wanted to step it up a bit. We wanted to do something different. So I had my board member Eric Bruner Yang and one of his close associates from Mahal Barbecue. They smoked dry aged brisket for every firehouse in DC, and we were able to deliver that. Myself and my volunteers were able to deliver that.
So what was it like putting your army together? I feel like as you get these people together to come follow this mission, to go do this deal, it's a little different than the for-profit world where like I think of our early days was I'm fighting for the first couple sales. Like I need someone to trade dollars for my stuff so I can afford to go to the next thing. And in the nonprofit world, it's almost like you're fighting for someone to let you into their fire station and to let you share their story. And then I'm sure there's a funding component as well. Well, tell me about that.
I think the hardest part wasn't coming into the fire service. I think what helped me out a lot is I was already a firefighter. So I knew a lot of people. I would go to places where I knew the officer who, some places where I knew people, right? I think that was the most comfortable because I was kind of nervous, if I'm honest, starting it. I'm still new in the job at the time I'm starting this. I only have 3 years on. So people are looking like, what's this dude doing? This is not what we do.
Yeah.
Right. Especially not in DC, a very traditional department. We're very, we can be very close knit in a lot of ways. But this is something that wasn't really seen. You don't go around firehouses just giving out food. That's not, so to a lot of people, that was could have been kind of weird. To me, it was more so me acting on the vision God had given me. So I had just went with it. It was, for me, it was, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission.
Bingo. That's like the fireman's mantra there, man. I tell you what.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of your early supporters.
Oh, wow. So I think all the companies that I named, the Amazons, the United Healthcares, Verizon, all of those are great, but we were really built on the backs of firefighters. They were the first ones to donate. I think the hardest thing has been me getting out of my own way of asking for donations. Because like I said, this is not something I could do by myself, but it was my idea. It was my vision. So I was uncomfortable in asking people to help me with this mission. But the firefighters were the first ones to step up, the first ones to donate. When we did the turkey drives, they were the first ones to help. And my thing was, I didn't create it for them to donate to themselves, but they respected what we were doing so much that they just were willing to give, just as I was willing to give. They saw somebody kind of taking something upon themselves, seeing something that needed to be fixed or needed to be addressed, and they rallied behind it. And they decided that they were going to give. So all the firefighters out there who supported in the early days, I want to say thank you. And they still support today. Every now and then, you might get a firefighter who will send a check of $1,000, or I may look online, it's $500.
No way.
They're giving to the DC One Fund, which is a charitable giving platform for district government employees that are taken directly out of your check.
That's awesome.
To given to the charity of your choice. So some donate through that. Some just buy T-shirts, buy sweatshirts. And they come out and support our events as well and volunteer. So we're grateful for those early supporters. I think our first big corporation that supported was Giant. And
how did they hear about you guys? Or how did they get, did you have to call them and say, hey, can you write me a check?
No, we did the work. None of those companies I mentioned we reached out to. All of them reached out to us. I think what people fail to realize is that if you just do the work, people will find you. I used to hear that. I played sports coming up, and people were like, "Oh, I'm going to a D2 school or D1 school or D3 school, and I won't be on TV." And you used to always hear the coaches, "If you do the work, they'll find you. If you play good and put the work in, they'll find you." And that's what we did. We just did the work. We didn't worry about where the money was going to come from.
Yeah.
We just did the work. We were serving.
And
that's
they
where
did.
the heart of the mission.
That's cool, man. I love to hear that. Can you talk a little bit about the systems required? I mean, it's like, it sounds so boring, and like, but our audience loves some of the nitty gritty of, like, if you picture this, the people that listen to our show are oftentimes firefighters. A lot of them work full time in the fire service or volunteer in the fire service and have an ambition to start a business, but that business could be for profit or nonprofit. I feel like your business is a business, just like my business is a business. We just do different things. And so businesses require some of these systems. Like in the early days, someone's throwing you a few bucks, fine, you just be a good steward and manage a few bucks well. But if you're serving 60,000 meals, there's a lot more than a few bucks changing hands. I'm sure there's a lot more logistics to it. What do your systems, and what are some of the things that have to be true in your business that you've had to learn along the way?
Being as though that we don't have any staff, we depend a lot on volunteers, right? So it's really about keeping a community of volunteers. Every Thanksgiving, we know people who are going to step up for us, right? We have this core of people, and most of them are firefighters. A lot of them are firefighters. But here lately, the more we've been on the news, the more media attention we get, a lot of people want to serve firefighters. I think it's not a new thing of people going to the firehouse, bringing cupcakes and things of that nature. So that's one system that we have in place, a volunteer list, being able to connect with our volunteers, letting them know why they're doing it, right? I think most people see the fire service as, oh, they're the heroes, they're okay. What really moves them is knowing that there are some obstacles that they have to overcome as well. So they want to kind of chip in. I think budget is a huge system that we have to look at, right?
Yeah, how do you manage that? Do you just like have Excel sheets that, I mean, I guess if you're the only guy,
we use QuickBooks.
You use QuickBooks. So I mean, you're doing it in a system.
Yeah, we're doing it in a system. So we use QuickBooks, but a lot of it is still dependent upon donations, right? So we want to give to everybody. Yeah. And oftentimes in the beginning, we did. Even to the point where, our account might reach $0. We'll be looking at the last $10. But I think that's where faith kind of kicked in, and where I thought food on the stove was over, then somebody sending a $20,000 check. Now, that's not a good way to run your business for the long haul. But in the beginning, I think it was important for us to build the rapport with the firefighters, for them to know that we were actually for them. One of the things I want to share with you that we did that I think helped build that rapport was during the pandemic, when it was difficult for everybody to get proteins or toilet paper. I'm sure you probably remember that. It was because grocery stores put limitations on the amount of food you can buy because people were hoarding food. Yeah. And rightfully so. But when firehouses went to the grocery store, they could only buy 2 packs of chicken because the grocery stores didn't put anything in place. The register will only ring up 2 packs of chicken. Yeah. But how do you feed a firehouse of 15 on 2 packs of chicken? You can't, right? So I think what you saw was that one of the greatest signs of brotherhood and sisterhood that I had seen was that people were bringing food from their own homes to make sure that they had a meal to piece together. But I didn't think that was any way for firefighters or first responders that were working on the front lines during the pandemic to have to survive. Yeah. And I want to use survive loosely because we had food, right? But that wasn't a way that I think we should be operating.
Yeah, but it's easy to grab a pack of chips when you're in an EMS bay at the hospital middle of the night versus doing the job properly. I've been there and done that a million times. When we go up to the local missions, our local hospital, the EMS room, oh man, they got chocolates and whatever.
Everything you shouldn't have.
Everything I shouldn't have. And I know I'm stuffing my fat face as quick as I can. I'm like, sign me up. And then I get back to the station. And I feel like hell. I've had 3 Red Bulls and 2 packs of chips. And I'm like, right. I don't know about.
But we wanted them to have a dignified meal while they're out there working on the front line.
Well, if you do the job right at the station, you cook dinner properly, you have your proteins right, like you do it right. If you're not starving at 3 o'clock in the morning, then you're not going to stuff your face with that stuff. But that requires planning properly and cooking properly and eating properly, and then. Yeah, then that you don't need that Snickers bar at 2 in the morning,
But the thing we did, since it was difficult for them to get that food, we fed firefighters every day for a year and a half. So we partnered with 28 different restaurants, and we fed firefighters, everybody from Ruth Chris to Chick-fil-A.
Sign me up. Next time DC's hiring, you let me know.
at that moment, and I think that's what everybody said. At that moment, it wasn't so much about our health and wellness message. It was about meeting an immediate need.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean by building the rapport. When people saw that it wasn't just about pushing our message on them and forcing our message upon them, it was really, oh, he cares about, or Food on the Stove cares about our well-being, the immediate needs. So if it was a chicken sandwich, if it was steaks, if it was empanadas, those restaurants kind of rallied behind what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then we were able to give to those firehouses, 400 people a day sometimes.
Can you talk to the logistics of how you manage? Like if you gave me the task, you got to go get 400 boxes of whatever to 400 people in fire stations. Like there's some amount of logistical. How do you even manage that? Like that, the volume at 3 or 4 meals, hey, you drive around, you deliver, whatever. But at that scale, what tactical things do you do to manage the logistics of that scale of giving and operations?
So for me, it was about, so at the time we were just operating in DC. It was finding out how many firehouses there were. I kind of already knew that we had 33 firehouses in a fireboat. It was going on. I actually went on to our work platform, our staffing platform, and I counted how many people worked each day. And then I called the fire chief and asked him, is this how many people work on staff each day? He said, yeah, give or take. Sometimes you have overtime bodies, you have this and that. So we knew there was around 356 people who worked daily for
at
DC
any given
Fire
time.
Name
That's
at any given time. So
Yeah.
I then went and saw how many people worked in each firehouse to make sure that we had enough for everybody. It's nothing worse than laying out short, going into a firehouse and not having able to feed 8 people, but they had 15 people.
Have you ever done that?
Never.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good.
Never.
So you planned that well.
Now, one of the things that you may hear is that it wasn't enough, but that was because we were trying to
You're
focus
doing
on portion control.
control.
It wasn't never that we couldn't feed everybody. That was the proper portion you should have. But even in that, the stuff that we're feeding them is pretty healthy. So if you need to go back for seconds, go ahead back. It's usually, proteins, good carbs, things of that nature. So not a lot of processed food, not any processed food, to be honest with you. So
that's cool.
So that was one of those things that kind of helped us out. So being able to being in DC, knowing the staffing, knowing how many firehouses there were. At the time, I had a lot of support from DC Fire and EMS where they were allowing us to utilize their vehicles to deliver this food.
Oh, nice.
So I had people helping me from the logistics division, and we'll go to the restaurants, we'll pick up the food and say, hey, if we can't feed everybody, at least we're feeding the whole battalion. So this battalion may have 74 people. Battalion 6, we have 6 battalions, or actually 7, but we will include the squad into wherever firehouse they were.
That's fine.
Battalion 6 had 74 people. We would divvy it up to every firehouse. We would tell the restaurant, hey, this firehouse has this many people. If you can divide it up for us so that we don't have to do it, all we have to do is pick it up. And they were happy to do it.
Yeah.
In some cases, some restaurants were able to donate, some weren't. And the ones that weren't able to, we wanted to support them. So Food on the Stove, through donations and things, were able to support those restaurants.
Yeah. How do you build those competencies for the financial management of the business?
Man, that's a good question. Like I said, we are still in our infancy. It's year 6. We are still in our infancy stages, right?
Yeah.
And I think I'm just getting over being able to ask for money.
Yeah.
I listened to a TED Talk by Brene Brown.
Oh, yeah. I love Brene Brown.
Yeah, she was really good. And she said something that really struck me. She said that you're not asking people for money to put in your pocket. You're asking people to help you change the world. And that kind of freed me from wanting to do it by myself or saying, I got to figure this all out.
Yeah.
Now, we're not at the point of having an endowment. We do get a lot of donations, but our goal is to be self-sustainable.
Yeah.
So my big vision for Food on the Stove is to take unused or underutilized firehouses and turn them into community markets or retail spaces so that every dollar that's spent in that space funds our programming.
Yeah.
So if that market or retail space generates $1 million, we now can give a stipend to every firehouse in that jurisdiction based on the support that we've had in the community.
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to get an old firehouse because we want to keep that nostalgia. We want to repurpose that firehouse. It was once a place that firefighters used to service the community. Now we want to use those places that are shut down to service the firefighters.
That's cool.
So when you buy your cup of coffee, your light fare food, anything from our market, still like more of a healthy driven market or retail space.
Yeah.
We now can say, hey, every firehouse this month has a stipend of $500 because your community rallied around and supported you.
Yeah. How do you learn the rules of engagement for this sort of thing? And I'm talking like IRS level, like, because if you're dealing with funds that are donated funds and then you're using those in a non-for-profit world, like I picture there's so many things who you can give to, who you can't give to. What's the process you've used to navigate understanding how to manage the, like, because that's nuts and bolts. It's less about feeding people. The IRS doesn't care what you're doing with it. They care
Right.
that you're following the rules. Can you talk a little bit about your process of like managing the rules behind, like the business side of it? Like what's that look like?
I would say get you a good board. Get you a good board and a good CPA. Right?
Have you got one?
I have one. I have great board members. I have a great CPA. I want to be good at what I'm good at, right? I think I can't be, my hands can't be in every pot. I think that's how we will easily fall.
Yeah.
But with my board members, I lean on them a lot. I ask them a lot of questions. We have board members who work in the banking industry, in the restaurant industry. We have one who is an accountant.
Awesome.
And then we have a separate CPA who works on all of our stuff, who has access to our QuickBooks and say, hey, what is this? What's that? And I think it makes it a lot easier for us because we don't have staffing. So everything that we have goes towards food, like food or promotional stuff for the company.
Yeah.
So there's nothing other than in our books except food, because that's what we're buying for firefighters.
Yeah, that's perfect. When did you know you needed to put a board in place, and how did you actually do that?
I mean, before you even start, you have to have a board in place. So at the time, in the beginning, just to even do the documentation, you have to put the board. So the board was me, my mom, and my brother. Because at that time, it was just an idea. Right? I went through LegalZoom, I did all the paperwork, and they sent it back like, "Who is your board?" So I said, "Okay, let me put 3 people who don't mind me using their name," and that was me, my brother, and my mother.
Yeah.
Now over time, I began to run into people who had a passion for firefighting. Who had a passion for EMS personnel, people who saw what we were doing after the first Thanksgiving drive, and they said, "Hey, let me help you with that." And so we were able to build a board of about 7 people. We had a fire chief on there, So yeah, they have been extremely helpful, extremely a great resource to us in places that I don't know much about.
Yeah.
They've served on other nonprofit boards, so they're actually teaching me how certain things work.
That's really interesting. And I think that's the sort of stuff that resonates so well with our audience. It's like, you got to start somewhere. Take that leap. Okay, so LegalZoom, like is that like, you can Google like starting a 501c3, how do I do this? And it'll help you with all the paperwork and documentation.
It gives you you don't have to do all the paperwork yourself. It's a plug-in type of thing. You're just putting all the information in, your name, social security number, EIN, whatever. They're processing it now. It's a little more costly.
Yeah.
But
someone can do it.
It takes all of the guesswork out of it.
How did you find those guys?
Just Google. And this isn't my first time having a business. I was a party promoter in the past.
No way.
I've had several businesses. So that process wasn't new to me. I think in the past, I've done it myself. And with this, I didn't want to do it myself. I just wanted to go through LegalZoom. Had a good job, so I said I'll pay a little bit extra money to get it started. That's
so interesting. How does this business differ from, if you've had other businesses or been around other businesses, how was the process different in starting a not-for-profit versus like like a for-profit enterprise?
I think there's not much difference, to be honest with you. I think the difference comes at the CPA level, the tax level, and all of that. But you run the business the same. You still have to market. You still have to connect to people.
Yeah.
You have to tell a story the same way you're telling a story with your business of how it's going to make something better or make someone better. How does this make your life better?
Yeah.
People tend to buy what they want, not what they need. So I'm not selling people on anything. I'm just, I like to say we're serving people.
Yeah.
So in that capacity, the same way we would create a product or an environment when I was throwing parties, I'm creating an environment within the firehouse that then leads to them saying, you know what, I have to pay more attention to my health.
Yeah. So you're kind of using that same philosophy of like, I got to create a service someone wants. Period. Like that if nobody wants what I've got to sell, then who cares? And you leverage that people want to take care of the first responders. They want to have a better environment for their future. They want to have a better family, whatever. So then you can kind of like instead of just saying like, oh yeah, you need to be healthy. Great. Nobody cares. But if you want to have all those other things and you kind of lean into that, and then you can kind of sell that as your deals. It
Well,
sounds
I
like
think that's
simple
one
philosophy.
half, right? That's for the donor half, right? Some people donate because of goodwill. Some people have a hard time donating, so they'll buy a product. So we have to have food on the stove shirts.
Yeah.
And food on the stove has to be a cool brand for them to want to buy it.
Interesting.
So you have that side of it, but then you have the other side of the firefighters. And I don't think that they don't care about eating healthy, right? I think one of the obstacles is that it costs more to eat healthier.
Yeah,
right? That's a true statement. People will say that, but we often respond as to that by saying either you pay for the food or you pay for the medication. You don't escape life not paying for one, right? But my thing is, how do we eliminate that excuse? And so for food on the stove, we want to help supplement the cost of those meals in the firehouse through our programming.
That's a good point.
We started an initiative called EMS. It stands for Eat More Salad. So that's where the promotional stuff starts to come in at.
That's so funny.
That's more of the selling point, something catchy to catch your attention, but then we're really giving you a quality product. So it's organic romaine, it's antibiotic hormone-free chicken. It's all of these great things that you're already eating anyway. We're just giving a better quality of it.
Yeah, it's so
at
funny.
The cost that you would normally purchase the bad stuff at.
I think that's really important, especially like you think about full-time public safety career. Like there's always more money to be made somewhere else. And I tell people that all the time. Like when I was working on an ambulance, I'm making $10 an hour. I mean, like it's better than nothing, but it wasn't like, that's not livable income, you know? And so
but think about it. I don't want to cut you off. Think about that. You said you make $10 an hour, right?
Yeah.
70% of the fire service is volunteer.
Yeah. Making no
So they don't even make 10.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny when you think about it that way though. It's like, so if I multiply 2080 by 10, that's 22,000. That's like almost poverty level. So yeah, am I going to choose a piece of chicken that costs $10, a piece of chicken that costs $4? I'm going to choose the $4 one if that's my only source of income. And that's where I've found that the reason this podcast exists is because so many firefighters have these part-time things, whether it's part-time that turns into full-time or like, what are they doing in their other time to supplement their income? Because if you're dedicated to public safety, it's not the most lucrative income stream producer, I guess, per se. And so as I think about it though, so many firefighters have these other things, but some of them don't. And so then it's an interesting point that you make where it's like, you really do need to be healthy. And the profession that these people choose, which are, they're my people. This is the group I want to serve, similar to the group you want to serve. Like, yeah, it's a hard ask. And I can see your position where it's like, you need to spend a little more to have the better food. You need to buy the salad. Don't buy the cheap garbage and don't buy the bag of chips. You know, you need to do it this. But then it's like, okay, well, the dollar has to come from somewhere. And so I think it's an interesting mission that you have where there is some level of supplemental external funding required in order to make that ask more palatable of the first responder, because it's like, hey, I get it. You're at work making whatever it is, but this is more expensive. And so it's a unique spot where I really think it's fun to hear your story of like having this promoter background and then the EMS, Eat More Salad thing. It's like, there is some of this, your story follows you through life. So you had that background. Now you're promoting this better deal, but you've got to spin it in a positive and you've got to convince someone to spend more than they typically would, who's on a income that's like, it's not for profit. We're not working at huge companies here. None of us are working at Amazon, you know, it's like.
Right. And you think about it, right? And if we worked in the private sector and your company sent you away for 24 hours away from your family, you would get a per diem.
Yeah.
To be able to feed yourself. In the fire service, we don't get that because we were birthed out of the volunteer system.
That's interesting.
So when you think about it, when they unionized and they got together and they said, okay, we're now going to give you in certain cities a salary, there was nothing to equate that, hey, I'm working 24 hours. We need some type of stipend for food. They were just happy.
They're probably like, hell yeah, you're going to pay me to do this job.
I would just go and do it for free.
Yeah.
So you think about it now, I think for the government, it's easier to increase a line item than create a whole new line item.
That's a really good point.
If they've never had to pay for food, it's not likely they're going to pay for it now because they're not going to correlate the health of the firefighter with the food that they're eating. So that's where food on the stove comes in at. We're trying to reshape their minds about how we see food, right? One of the analogies that we make is that food is fuel. And if I was to give you the keys to my Lamborghini, and I don't have a Lamborghini, by the way, but if I gave you the keys to my Lamborghini and I said, hey, you can drive it for the day, just fill it up. What type of fuel would you put in it?
Probably good fuel.
the best, right?
Yeah.
And I asked you, why would you put the best in it?
Well, because it's a Lamborghini. Like, you gotta, it's what you give me the car. Like, that's what it needs. You gotta put good fuel in it if you want to get good performance. It's a race car.
Right. So then my next response to this, why don't you treat your body, or why don't we treat our bodies the same way?
Yeah, that's a great question.
We're a high performance vehicle, especially as a firefighter. You're asked to push your body to the limit. You're waking up, you're at 60 beats per minute to 120 beats per minute in less than 10 seconds. You're sliding a pole, your adrenaline is rushing, heart's beating fast, heart rate is up. And just like if you don't do good maintenance on the car or fuel it properly, what's going to end up happening?
Yeah, it blows up. Go to the shop all the time. It's like,
It's going to break down at some
Yeah.
point, and to the point it's going to become a lemon. And that's what's happening to us. Our bodies are designed to take the nutrients from food and eliminate the waste. Part of the problem is that we're not taking in the stuff, fiber, that helps us eliminate the waste. So the same thing as you would throw trash in a trash can and never take it out, what's going to happen? It's going to rot. It's going to decay. It's going to start to smell.
yeah.
And the same thing's happening within our bodies. We're taking in the nutrients, but we're not eliminating the waste. So therefore, we're starting to see disease and things of that nature happening in our body.
Interesting. Well, what's next for your business? I mean, where are you guys going? What's the big next ask? What can our viewers do to support your mission and that sort of thing?
Advocate. So while I work for DC Fire and EMS, I'm a firefighter advocate. I'm talking to you not as a firefighter, but an advocate for firefighters. We want people to donate to Food on the Stove, to support the Food on the Stove, so that we can continue to put healthier meals on firehouse tables. But we also don't want to solely depend on donations. As I mentioned, we want to be self-sustainable. We want to work with jurisdictions who have unused or underutilized firehouses that will be willing to work alongside of us to turn this into a space that the community can utilize, that we can then generate some revenue to go back into the programs that we have to put healthier meals on firehouse tables. That's important to me. It's important that we are self-sustainable, that we don't live, the life of this organization isn't dependent upon donations. I think one thing that Food on the Stove has done well is connect companies that really have nothing to do with the fire service to the fire service.
Yeah.
Your Amazons, your Verizons,
Yeah.
they don't have a direct connection to the fire service. And to be honest with you, we don't get a lot of support from companies that's within the fire service.
Yeah.
And I want to call that out because I feel like there's a lot of people who make a lot of money on the fire service who don't give back to firefighters. Firefighters are typically at the bottom of the barrel, and they do it to serve, right? But I want to encourage the companies who are out there, who make their money and they're living off the fire service, to give back to those firefighters. They need you.
Yeah.
And people typically support who support them. So if you're in this industry, let's take care of one another.
I like
so
that.
Help us get that firehouse, help us put healthier meals on firehouse tables, sponsor our DMV Fire and EMS Week, help us to continue to advocate and bring awareness to the things that are going on within the fire service.
That's fantastic. I think it's a great mission you're working on. And how would our audience find you if they wanted to learn more? Are you guys online or social channels?
Yeah, we're at foodonthestove.org. We're on Facebook, Food on the Stove. We're on Twitter, Food on the Stove _ Instagram, Food on the Stove DC. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jonathan Tate. Check us out. We produce a lot of content and show us going inside the firehouse. We have DMV Fire and EMS Week coming up in DC, July 15th through the 20th, where we do a series of events. Our theme this year is Recruit, Retain, Retire. How do we recruit more firefighters, retain the ones we have, and make sure that they're retiring healthy and wealthy? And we're doing a charity golf tournament. We do a midnight run called One Run After Midnight to bring awareness to sleep deprivation in the fire service. Most people know we call our dispatch calls runs, and depending on how many runs you take after midnight, will determine how much sleep you get, which ultimately adds to heart disease. So we have the community stand in solidarity with firefighters by doing their midnight 5K.
That's awesome.
So we ask that you join us in that. We have our annual fundraiser, Dress Blue, which is an all-blue cocktail style event with moderated discussions centered around stories in the fire service. So if you're in the DC area, July 15th through the 20th, look us up. We would love to have you there. And anybody who's interested in sponsoring, we would love to have you on board as well.
That's fantastic. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure hearing about the Food on the Stove mission journey and your story as well. So it's been a real treat having you on the show today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, bro. Thank you for sharing your platform with me.
My pleasure. Hey guys, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something. If you want to be on the show or you know someone who should, head over to the2448.com and submit your business. Don't forget to follow and subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If you thought it was 4 stars, still give us 5 stars or I will find you. See you next time. Later.